Hello, it's Tonya Duncan Ellis from the Sophie Washington series, here for the first episode of Write This, where I'll be interviewing Melina Mangal, my sister in the Amplify Black Stories cohort, sponsored by the Brown Bookshelf and the Highlights Foundation. And today we're going to learn all about her author journey and the books that she's created. So I'm going to invite her on. See, get Melina. Sent her a request and we're going to get her on to learn all about her books and all about her author journey. And thank you guys for all your support. Melina has joined. Melina, I sent you the invitation. So, or can you say that you're coming in as well? You can come on and join. So Melina, have you gotten your invitation? We'll wait for her to come in, but I'm so happy that you could join and come into the first episode of Write This. We're waiting for the guests to come. And I'm excited to get some information from her about her books and her writing process. She's written some biographies that look really neat, and I want to learn all about them. I see that she's in the meeting, but I don't know if she's able to come in. Melina, did you get the invite? Okay. I'm waiting for the sign from Melina. I see some other people here. But while we're waiting for Melina to come, can anyone does anybody have any questions of me? Any questions about the writing process, book marketing, any kind of questions you might have? I'll be happy to answer them while I'm here. Okay. And Melina's phone, the invitation keeps saying it's expired, but can you request to join? Even if request to join the group yourself. Okay. I don't know what in the world is going on or why this is happening. For some reason, it keeps saying that it's expired when Melina is trying to accept my invitation. So I've sent it again. Can you request to join me, Melina? No, I'm not sure what's going on, y'all. Oh, goodness. Let's see. Oh, okay. Melina, it says that you need to upgrade your app to join. So I'm not sure what's going on. It says Melina needs to upgrade app to join when I checked on the question. Okay, someone asked me how many books I've written and when did I start writing. I've written 12 books, and I actually started writing from the time I was a little girl. When I was in the 5th grade, I won a writing competition at my school, and that's what inspired me to write my own books. My teachers all encouraged me to write. So I really wanted to be a newspaper reporter. So I wrote for an article that I wrote was actually published in my hometown newspaper in Louisville, Kentucky. When I was 14, my picture was in the paper. So I got paid for that. So that got me excited about writing as a career one day. So that's kind of how I got my start. And I started writing the Sophie Washington series when I was reading with my children. I always had in my heart to write books, and I had worked in journalism for years. And so I was reading books with them, and I noticed there weren't many with diverse characters that especially my sons could relate to. And so there were so many interesting things going on in my own community here in Houston. I said, this would be really fun for kids to learn about all the neat things we see. Like, for example, I see alligators in my neighborhood. I see wild boar. So I said, this will be pretty cool for a series. So that's how I started my Sophie Washington series. Okay. Hi. I see Chloe from Chloe Cares is here. I'm so happy that all of y'all are here. So really, Melina has to re-upload the Instagram app because it says her app is outdated and it needs to be updated. And she spends her time writing more than playing around with like I do on, on this internet. So she's got to update that. And then she's going to be here to join us. But until she comes, I'm going to take questions from y'all. Let's see if anybody else has a question. Okay, so someone asked me how many books I've written and when I started writing. Anybody else have any other questions of me while I'm here? And while we're waiting to get Melina on. But, you know, I'm really excited about this series that I have. I've got some really great authors lined up to come in and talk about their journeys. And I'm curious to learn a lot of their backgrounds as well and some of their writing process and just the journey for publication, because I'm an independently published author, but I'm also going through the route to get one of my newest manuscripts traditionally published. So I'm learning along the way as I follow that path as well. And it's been a lot of ups and downs. So that's been really exciting. So we're waiting on her to get here. And just to give you, I don't know a lot about Melina, so this is why I was happy to have her on. I know that she's big in nature, that she's a librarian, and that she has done a lot of research and actually worked with some other famous children's authors, really top in the children's book space. So I'm really excited to get to talk to her about that. Okay, I'm going to send another invite. Send it on. Oh, I waved at my friend in Florida. Ooh. I sent it. Yay, he's here. Other famous children. I'm sorry about that.
Oh.
Book space, so I'm really excited to
Hi.
get to talk to her about that. Okay,
can you hear me?
Another invite. Like a lag, I can hear my own voice. And then, anyway, we're so happy to see your pretty face and see you here. And
thank you.
I should have got there. I'm not really the most technically savvy. Now, I wrote Sophie Washington Code 1, but you can see that I'm by no means a computer coder.
I appreciate your patience. And, you know, I used a lot of different things. I just haven't used Instagram for live. And I turn off a lot of notifications because there's just too much going on. And so I probably should have paid attention to that. But thank you. And thank you for your gracious patience and waiting for me.
Thank you. Happy to have you here. Thank you for taking your time to come and spend a little. Okay. But can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I've told him a little bit, but tell us more about your background, where you're from, and about
Yeah, I'm happy to. And thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate the invitation and just, again, your time. I am a school librarian. That's what I do during the day, during the school year. So I am always surrounded by books. I love books, and I have been reading and writing for a long time. I have been publishing books for mostly children in the last 20 years. So I'm a slow writer, but I came to it as a school librarian. I did want to write at a much younger age, but didn't really think it was something I could do as a career. So I started off, interestingly enough, working in publishing. I worked for a college textbook publisher, and I was making textbooks for colleges. And I really enjoyed that process, but felt I wanted to work more directly with people. I'm a people person and like being with people. And so I ended up leaving that job and going into library school to become a librarian. And I first started working in an academic library. I was in North Carolina. I went to Chapel Hill and was working at Duke in reference, but I went to a school library conference at that time because I was exploring all areas of librarianship. And I was just hooked. I just really like working with kids and the kinds of things that I saw that you could do and excite children with got me interested in becoming a school librarian. And so that's the path I took. I became a librarian first and started working in that area, and then kept writing mostly for myself, but right before library school had submitted something to, it was an open call for entries for women's journal entries. And interestingly enough, I was published at that time. That was my first published piece. And it was just a raw journal entry.
Oh.
And when that was published, I was really taken aback because it was so raw. And I was told, just let it be, you know, there's not much editing required. But it was in the pages along with a lot of other really high profile people, writers. And so when I saw what they had in there, it really intimidated me and it made me kind of back off of trying to publish for a while. And
Now,
so
what
I spent time.
were in there? Who else was in there?
There's Faith Adiele. There is Nikki Finney. There's a whole host of people that are really big names and that just intimidated me, like I said, because when I looked at their pieces next to mine, I thought, these are polished and really read well. And I need to refine my craft more. So I spent a lot more time after that starting to take classes through organizations like there was the Carolina Writers Network and different writing classes. And when I moved back to Minnesota, this is where I live right now in Minnesota, through the Loft, and just doing my best to become a better writer before I started submitting.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you have a lot of experience just honing your craft and then working with the children. That
Mm-hmm.
marriage between you are, is that what led you to write children's books, or do you primarily write children's book? I don't really know.
Yeah. What's been published is primarily for children,
Mm.
although I really like short stories as well. And so I do have some short stories that have been written for adults as well, and now for YA. Um, so I write. I guess what's been published is mostly short form. So I have written a young adult novel that has not been accepted anywhere yet, and so I put that one aside. But when I first started writing, what was first published was some journal entries and poetry. And
Mm.
so poetry is my first love, but I haven't really tried to publish anything beyond what I do for myself. So yeah, I'm primarily my focus has been with children. I don't let that.
As poetic, I really see that kind of as poetry.
Mm-hmm. Especially picture books, because you really have to condense and be really selective in your words, and just it like poetry. Every word counts, line
Hmm.
breaks, all of that. So yeah, I do see that as a type of poetry, and I try to approach it that way as well.
Hmm. That is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I read somewhere too. Do you have any kind of French roots? I know your name's Melina.
Yeah, and I saw that you speak French too, right? Tu
Little
parles français.
but I
Ah,
met French in college and lived in France for a year.
yeah, bah c'est bien. Yes, I was born in France, in Bordeaux, and my mother is French. So I grew up learning to speak French with my mother, and I still speak some now. She lives here in Minnesota as well. But yeah, so that's where that's part of my background. And right now I'm speaking French with my daughter, so trying to pass along the French torch there. And I still correspond and see family there when we go. We try to go every couple of years. So yeah, where did you live when you were there?
I lived in Strasbourg.
Oh, okay, great, great. I've never been there, but that's a place I'd like to visit someday as well.
Yeah,
So
that was a wonderful experience. So I loved being there.
good, good. Yeah. But yeah, so I for the first time I just wrote a young adult story that actually looks at someone who is African American and French like me. And that's the first time I actually worked on a full length story. I've worked on some picture books that haven't been published yet that deal with with being bicultural like that. But this was the first time this summer that I actually dug into it and explored a bit more, my background. So yeah.
Oh. Now, can you tell us about your newest book? I know you have a new book that talks about nature. Is that what
I
the
do. I do. In most of what I do, I'm exploring our relationship with nature, and how nature is a big part of our lives historically as African Americans. My father's from Mississippi, and so he grew up surrounded by nature, and just it's a big part of his upbringing and mine too. Even though most of my early childhood was all over the Midwest and in the North, but we were out in the woods a lot. And I feel like that's something that some people forget. It's also something that we don't always see in picture books or children's books, that, we are out there in the woods, we are out there in nature. And sometimes nature comes to us and we look for nature. But my newest book is called Jaden's Impossible Garden. And this just came out in March with Strive Free Spirit Publishing. And I'm really excited because this book was the winner of the first African American Voices in Literature contest here in Minnesota. And so there's a new publisher called Strive, which is an African American publisher in Minnesota, and they are putting out books like this. And so this is about a boy who sees nature around him, even though he lives in the city, and he helps point out and help others observe and notice things that they might overlook. Ants, ant hills, birds, some things that we just maybe are too busy to notice as adults because we're on our way trying to get from point A to point B, but appreciating nature, and then also combining forces with an elderly neighbor who also happens to be from Mississippi, and joining forces to help cultivate more nature in their neighborhood by planting a garden. So yeah.
so
So
neat? Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's it's a big focus of mine because I feel like we need to be out in nature as much as possible outside. Not everyone can be, not everyone has the neighborhood where it's always as safe, or there are reasons why kids can't always be outside in an idyllic situation. Some of my students are not able to go outside in the same way that other kids can, so it really varies, but I still think it's important for kids to know that it's always there for them. And things like bird watching are part of nature that we can do no matter where we are. And I shouldn't say bird watching, but observing birds, because right now I can't see them. I'm in my basement, but I can hear them. And so being in tune with whatever nature is near you helps not only yourself, but it helps keep our world in a better spot,
You know,
ecologically.
during the pandemic, I was outside more than I was from the time of a little girl because just getting
Mhm.
help calm my nerves. And I
Right.
know many birds, different varieties that I never had paid any attention to before. So
Hmm.
outside makes you aware of so many different things.
Right. And it starts to help you be aware of your own behavior in nature, just in terms of, where are we putting our trash? Where are we putting things? Cars, do we need to drive the car to get, a couple blocks away? Can we walk there? So,
Mm,
which is ultimately better for our health as well. So,
right. So that is,
yeah.
and that fills a niche that needs to be filled, fills a vacuum for our community as African Americans.
Right, right. And so that's just a big part of what I wanted to convey in this book. And also just the importance of community, building community, and that maybe you hadn't really talked to before, but that who could become great allies. Um, and also just the power of imaginative play, you know, just showing kids, African American kids, just, you know, building forts,
Right.
having adventures from books that they read. And so that was another part of what I wanted to convey with that. Um, and there's also scarlet runner beans in here.
Oh, what's that? What? Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's going to say there's also scarlet runner beans in here. So I discovered a really fun bean plant that I've started growing before this, which partly of what prompted that in here. And so gardening and linking to food, healthy food is also another part of that that I wanted to connect.
Where can we get this book? Where can buy your book?
Well, you can get it most everywhere you buy books online. For example, bookshop.org. And, you know, when you go through bookshop.org, you can select the bookstore that you prefer. It could be a bookstore in your neighborhood. There's a couple in my neighborhood that when you order through them, the proceeds go back to that bookstore, or a percentage of the proceeds. You know, I'm sure Amazon, anywhere else you order online. You could ask for it at your local bookstore if you'd like. You know, they can order it if they don't already have it. And then through the publisher as well, which is Free Spirit Publishing, they
Mm,
also can or to take direct orders as well. So, yeah,
that's awesome. Now we've
yeah,
got authors on and other people who want to write books as well. Could you give some tips for aspiring authors? What can they
yeah.
get there? How can they develop as writers?
Well, first off, I it starts with reading, I think. So I think read as much of what you like as possible. And after reading it just for enjoyment, really look at how things are put together. And with picture books, of course, that's, you know, there's some real mechanics to look at too, but because picture books typically have very specific number of pages. So observing how the page breaks happen. I always have a collection of picture books near me too, but observing how the words fall on the page, reading it out loud. So read and reread picture books if that's the genre. But of course, if you're into middle grade or whatever you like, really dig into it and spend some time actually studying them and just observing technically how they're put together. But also the words that pop out at you. You know, I'm always keeping notebook and writing down lines from books that I really like. And I've started keeping a spreadsheet of first lines, last lines, and the way chapters are put together as well. So I think that's a really good exercise and practice to get into. I think that's a lot of fun too, because I'm looking at books that I enjoy. And also books that are just extremely popular that may not be the ones that you gravitate toward as much, but look at what those bestsellers are doing that is getting all the attention, you know, because there may be some things there that that you can learn from the way they are put together. And then of course writing. I am always trying to get better in my process. I do keep a journal. I have lots of little notebooks that I use. I like these composition notebooks. So I write longhand at
Mm.
first. That's how I get my initial feelings, impressions, ideas down. And I like just that tactile experience. For me, that's just a lot of fun. But as I get busier, I'm a mom too, like many people, and working full time and all the other things we have to do. I'm finding that, of course, there's always times when I don't have my pencil, my pen, and my notebook handy, or I'm driving. So I'm starting to use my phone more too, taking voice memo, using to record my thoughts. So I try to record things as they're fresh and just kind of dump it on the page and keep writing. And I don't really think about what it's going to become initially. I just like to get stuff down. And then I go back. And that's when I really reread things. That's when the real editing starts to happen. And that's when I type it up and print it out and start going over it and over it and over it. Um, so I think that's just part of my process, but I think it's one that really helps for me keep the focus on fun. That may not sound like fun to some people, but I think whatever your fun is in writing, because I think most of us come to writing with some aspect of pure enjoyment. There's something you enjoy in it, whether for me, it's also part of the research when I'm doing nonfiction or biography books. But keep that focus on fun first. Do what it is that just makes you happy. And whether, some people just really like to get to their computer and, tap away. But do that as much as you can and get that first until whatever you're getting out starts to look like something or starts to tell you, yeah, I'm going to be short story, or this is the first chapter of a middle grade novel, or this is a picture book, and then start going away, chipping at it, or adding more if you need to. But I think those are just some of the biggest things, really just reading, and carving out the time to write. I have summer, so I have a little bit more time in the summer to write. But during the school year, what I'm often having to do is get a few thoughts down before I go to work. And then I end up writing more at the end of the day, like before I go to bed. So my routine shifts quite a bit depending on the season. Because I'm someone that has to be outdoors too, first thing in the morning in the summer. So I'm out there, and I usually come now later in the afternoon. I try to write a little bit when it's really, really hot outside, and and I don't mind being inside. So yeah, so those are a couple of things I can think of that really keep me going.
Well, that is wonderful advice. And once I'm off the interview, I'm going to go back and take some notes, you said, because that's awesome advice. And another question I had for you, I was by because you wrote some biographies on a couple of my favorite authors, Mildred D. Taylor, and Rita Williams Garcia. Can you share a little bit about you get to meet them, or what was that like?
Yeah, great question. And I love writing biographies, and I've written 5 of them. So that's probably my first love. There's so many fascinating, amazing people out there that our young people should know about. I feel everybody should know about. So Mildred Taylor was a really interesting project. The book I wrote about her, of course, started from my love of her books. And she too was from Mississippi, which, like my father, I mentioned he's from Mississippi. So there was that connection I had. And her books really got me thinking about my own family history and started me, well, I already started, but really helped me want to dig more into that history. But I had to do a lot of to interview her. I wanted to interview her, but was unable to. Um, she is not a very public person in terms of getting herself out there. And it may have just been me too, but at that time, she was not available for interviews. And so I did what I could from interviews she had already done and from documents. And again, that's the kind of thing I love doing as a research nerd.
Quick question. Did you have to get her permission to use things that were already out in the public domain?
Yeah, that's a good question. When material is out there in the public domain, it is, and if it is, publicly available, it is okay to use. I did contact her about, and it was through her editor, about the information, and she, it's not an authorized biography like some are, but she did not express any discontent or any issues with it. So, so I'm hoping I never did hear anything about it, but I'm hoping that that I did a satisfactory job, and that that she likes what I put out there. I just felt it was really important to, you know, get her life story out there, because I do think she has a fascinating story as well. And then read it.
Look, I love Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. So I gotta.
Yes, powerful book. And then she has a new one that just came out last year, within the last 2 years too, the last of the Logan family saga too. And so it's quite the collection. And Rita Williams Garcia was a totally different approach. I had already met her, and I already loved all the books that she had written. And so I had spent a week with her at a highlights writing camp, workshop at Chautauqua. They used to be held at Chautauqua. And so I had a chance to speak to her and get to know her a little bit at that time. And so we had corresponded after that, and I told her, I want to write a book about you. And she was wonderfully gracious, gave me her time. I got to interview her, and she had sent me some of the photos that we used for the book as well. And so it's just a different point in people's lives too, about what they're able to do and not able to do. But that was super fun, being able to interview her. And that part, the interviewing, was something that was new to me as well. I had interviewed Virginia Hamilton's husband, Arnold Adolph, who unfortunately just passed, for her book, because she had already passed. But that really got me started in interviewing people. I've interviewed people for other projects, and now I'm really interested in oral histories. But I think that's just a lot of fun, and I really I would love to do that for every project. But I was able to do that for Ernest Everett Just's book. That's my picture book biography that came out a couple of years ago, The Vast Wonder of the World. And I didn't get to know him because he passed away in 1941, but I did get to meet his granddaughter, actually his niece. And I interviewed her to get some new information that hadn't been put out there before about him. And so now that's just another part of my process that I love to do. That really opened up another world, being able to interview people and not just look through documents. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is really awesome. I'm working on a picture book that talks about someone who's deceased, and I was wondering about that. They had written things that are in the public domain, but I didn't get permission from the family. The person doesn't have any children or I can't find the family. So that's why I was like, well, can I use this information? So I guess I should be able to.
Yes, you can. If it's publicly available, you most certainly can. There are certain things that might be tricky,
Right.
and that's part of the biographer's job, I think, is to really wade through and sift through what is most important and true to helping reveal this person's character, and what might make it into the back matter. That's a nice thing about picture book biographies. There's back matter, and so you can always add more at the very back. I've got so many books here, but you can always add back some notes or put it in a timeline. And so but that's part of the fun challenge, I think, is trying to decide what's really part of this person's story for young people, for your audience, and then what might be needed for teachers and educators that could help them in the back matter, or just save it for yourself for another project. Sometimes these facts end up becoming part of something else, maybe historical fiction or something else from that time period. So
Right.
it doesn't get wasted, but it just may not always end up in that particular book.
Right. Now you've provided just a treasure trove of information for us all. And I know, like I said, we've got some writers here. I wonder if any of them have any questions that we could, if they want to ask questions here for you to answer. If anybody, someone said, please share a picture book list. So what I'll do is maybe I get a list from you, Melina,
Yeah.
and I'll share that on my page for people interested in purchasing your books, because she has books for all ages, basically.
I do.
Very
Yeah.
make that available.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Someone said, what was your inspiration for the vast wonder of the world?
That's a good question. It started with my daughter. My daughter at the time was in kindergarten, first grade, and her school had Black History Month event. And I went, and one of the things they had available, little activities for students to do, was a coloring center. There were coloring sheets, and there was a coloring sheet of Ernest Everett Just, and it listed him as a marine biologist. And because I'm a school librarian, I thought I knew about a lot of people, and I'd never heard of him. And so I thought, I'm going to just poke around, see who this is. And, there was a good little summary about his accomplishments as a scientist who worked with marine animals. But I Googled him and found there was a really good academic book written about him by an MIT professor. So I got that book, and that book was amazing. Um, I also found out that he was featured on a postage stamp. So I thought, he's known. He's known among scientists, but his work was phenomenal, and he was a real trailblazer. So I thought, the more I started to find out about him as a scientist, but also his personal story, I thought, kids need to know about him. I would love for kids to know his story. There's very few scientists that we can name, that I could name when I was a kid. I could think of George Washington Carver, you know,
Right.
and, we've got more scientists out there. But plus, scientists in general in the United States are not heralded or held up as much as in other countries. We can all think of Einstein, but there are many people who are, and not that Einstein wasn't an ordinary person, but who live ordinary lives and who don't always know from the get-go what they want to be. And Ernest Everett Just was like that. He started off as actually an English professor at Howard University, and I thought his path was just so interesting. And it's the kind of life that many of us lead, where, we're not sure until we get to a certain age or until we get exposed to different things. And so that was another reason why I wanted to highlight his life once I learned more about him. And of course, growing up in South Carolina, he had many, many, many challenges at the turn of the last century. So in the uh, late 1800s, early 1900s, life was very difficult. And so I thought that was important to really highlight that as an example too of, what, we don't always come from perfect backgrounds or have a really easy time, but through that adversity, um, he showed real strength and was just a great role model, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Well,
how I got into him.
well, I'll provide a listing of all your books so that people can check them out, because this is just so much history and information that we all need to learn. And then it's so cool that now we know the process behind a lot of these books that you've created. Now, any other parting comments you have, or anything else you want to share with us? And also, could you tell us where everyone can reach you or find you online?
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, thanks. Well, I do have a website. It's melinamangal.com, and my name does not look the way it's pronounced, but it's melinamangal.com. So I do have a website where you can reach me. And I really want to encourage people to listen to your own voice. If you feel compelled to read certain things that maybe people aren't reading or, not considered as popular, just stick with it. There's a reason why you gravitate towards what you are gravitating towards. And in your writing, keep that, retain that, stick with that, because when people start publishing, and I think a lot of you have encountered this already, they're great editors. They're people, I really like working with editors because they really help you improve your writing. But there are times when, and I've had this experience, when my writing has become watered down, when people try to get it to fit into a mold that really doesn't fit into. And so I think, hold on to your words, your voice. And that's something that's taken me a long time to arrive at, holding on to my voice and really sticking with it. And we constantly come up against that. And it's so important to just hold on to that. And of course, to write it all down.
Okay. Well, that was wonderful. That was a great way to wrap up our session. I want to thank you, Melina, for hanging in and coming on with me and sharing your gifts with us, because this has just been a big treat for me personally, I know. And I'm sure a lot of the writers out there are going to learn so much. And I have some teachers on here too, so they're looking forward to grabbing a copy of some of your books to include in their classroom libraries. So thank you
Great. Well,
again.
thank you. Thank you for inviting me here and for your patience as I stumbled through, getting connected. I really appreciate that. And
Yeah,
I'm reading your books and I'm so excited about Sophie Washington and the whole
but
series. So
thank you. I'm happy to be in the cohort. And I started this too as a way to get to know some of the cohort members a little better, because we're in our meetings on Zoom. So this is a way for me to get to know a little bit more about you all and your works and background. So I consider it an
yeah,
honor. I'm with you. Okay.
thank
Well,
you. Same here.
yeah, thank you everybody for coming. And until next week, we'll be having another episode of Write This with another amazing author. So I hope that you'll be able to join us. And I'll be keeping video of this on my page so you can check it out again if you want to take some notes or learn more. Thanks a lot, Melina, and thanks for everyone for joining us. Till next
Thank you, Tom.
time.
Okay, bye. Take care. Thanks.